What's up, everybody? It's Kendall, and we are here once again on day 29 of 100 Days of Code. Day 29 and the start of week 5. Week 5! Can you believe it? Week 5 of School of Code. We're there. We're at the beginning of week 5. And this week's all about SQL or SQL or however you call it, databases, all those sorts of things. So I'm excited about this week. It's going to be cool. And it started with the bang. So day 29 of 100 Days of Code started with the bang. Of course, I'm not talking about the squats, which also make it start with a bang. They were definitely banging. We had a little bit of some beautiful Bee Gees, a bit of ha 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 ha, still alive, still alive. I know, thank you. I know, I do a great job at the Bee Gees impression and get up to those high notes. See, very good. But whatever the case, day 29. So we started off with some squats to the Bee Gees. We did our normal Mentimeter where we said what we were grateful for, and very nicely, somebody talked about meeting with fellow boot campers. So shout out to all those people this week who met up with fellow boot campers. Awesome job. Thank you for pointing that out. What else did we look at? We looked at as well this morning. We started looking at SQL or SQL, and we talked about relational databases and non-relational databases and those sorts of things and like what the differences were. We looked at persistent storage with databases. We looked at how CRUD is persistent in every single language. So no matter what the language is, CRUD is the criteria. And what is it? Create, read, update, delete, create, read, update, delete, create, read, update, delete, which we know from the song that Liz did. Liz spoke about sort of databases and all the different types that there were, and there was like this major, huge database. One of the first ones literally was filled with mercury. Yay, lovely. We talked about sort of how, in every client and server relationship, no matter what it is, you request and response like we'd learned before. We learned about sort of, how it would work with, sort of Twitter. Twitter would sort of send a request. Somebody would send a request from their client side to Twitter. Twitter would send back a response. And then, of course, the Twitter backends would request whatever that data was from the database, which is cool. We spoke about how sort of last week we were sort of mimicking this back end and front end all on our computer. And sort of the relationship of that. We talked about relational and non-relational databases. So sort of those that, well, the word relational, so they relate to one another. Then you got ones that don't relate one to one another. So that's fun. So essentially a non-relational database, it does not incorporate the table model. Instead, data can be stored in a single document file, where a relational database organizes structured data fields into defined columns. So you might have ID1, ID2, ID3, for example. And we were given an example of sort of a table that had users with ID numbers and names and email addresses, and that was relational. Non-relational was something more like, a JSON file where you have like, them organized, but they weren't as structured as a table. We talked about relational languages or ways of going about it, where things like GraphSQL and MySQL and Amazon RDS and Microsoft SQL Server and Oracle. And then we looked at non-relational, which were Mongo and Amazon DynamoDB and Amazon DocumentDB and Couchbase and Redis and all sorts of things like that. So that was really fun. We also talked about select statements. So, using select, for example, asterisks from users. So select is a command and then from is a command. And you can use the asterisk, which is like selecting all of them, and specify it to sort of that section of the thing. So we learned that sort of in the morning. That was just the morning. I mean, come on. Amazing, right? Then we had the legend. That is Mr. Kyle Simpson. Mr. Kyle Simpson. Mr. Kyle Simpson, a legend in the space of JS. He wrote that book, You Don't Know JS. And if you have not read that book, you need to check it out. It's a bit of a legendary piece in our community of JavaScript. and he's a JavaScript legend, as I said, a hero among men and women. And he was actually all the way from the US speaking to us before he's about to go to Greece. And he spoke to us and gave us a sneak peek into his talk to that place, freshly off the boat in that sort of sense. So it was really, really cool to have him come and speak to us. He spoke on lots of things like how it's good to be an imposter, and that being an imposter, if you look it up, one of the definitions is sort of being an empiric. And he sort of spoke about how being an empiric means that you sort of act and you practice until you have the empirical, there's just not enough empirical data for you to be an expert. So you sort of work on it. It was really, really an interesting way of looking at it. And he sort of redefined what being a imposter was. And that it wasn't the fact that you were being malicious or you were like trying to be cunning and you were trying to like, fool people. That actually you genuinely wanted to become the real article, but like you had to practice in order to become that. You had to become empirical. So that was super cool to hear about that. He spoke about accessibility and sort of the importance of it and how accessibility should become sort of the standard. And he talked about the WCAG 2.x principles. So those include things like perceivable, it being operable, understandable, and robust, and that code should be that. He mentioned about sort of ARIA labels and that those should become the standard, which is really cool. And I love this example where he spoke about sort of this guy who had glasses, who was a fellow coder, said to him, that they were both disabled. And he was like, well, why is that? Well, we both have to wear glasses, and glasses are things that enable us to see. But what about other people that don't have these ways that make things easier for them? That this should be, for all able-bodied people, that accessibility should be the standard. It was a great talk. And then there was a Q&A. So awesome. Kyle Simpson was awesome. What a privilege to have him come and speak to us. Cohort 12, awesome. After lunch, we talked about where clauses. So we talked about, grabbing things out of the database and where you can do that. And there was a picture of an elephant with lobster claws. Why not? We talked about insert into, so inserting in things into a table because we're working with relational tables and those sort of things. And we actually practice it with, oh gosh, what was that website called? Anyways, we use this like safe thing. We talked about update. It was like a sandbox environment where you could practice. I can't remember what it's called, but anyways, you could basically go into it and you can use code and, it's not exactly a real world thing, but you can practice your code in that way. So we had a lot of fun using all those things today. What are my thoughts and feelings so far about today? What a brilliant day. Kyle Simpson coming. Met my new pair partner, who's awesome. He's an NBA fan as well, so we got to talk NBA playoffs. We got to talk about codes and all things good like that. So here's what we did today. We did this. We eat, sleep, conquer, repeats. Or maybe we eat, sleep, code, repeat. But we conquer as well. That's how we roll. So anyways, guys, that's day 29. School of Codes, week 5. And guys, we'll see you on the next one, day 30. Have a great day. Keep calm. Code on. Peace out.